The sky was just beginning to lighten when we pulled out of the driveway that morning. It was supposed to be a beautiful day. The sun had crept over the horizon, lazy and golden. Birds chirped as if they were auditioning for a Disney movie, and the highway ahead stretched out like a silk ribbon toward my family's lake house. My playlist was humming softly, and I had a steaming thermos of cinnamon coffee beside me. My husband, Miles, sat quietly in the passenger seat, hands folded, eyes distant. It was our first family reunion since my father's surgery. Everyone would be there. My parents, my older brother Daniel, my Aunt Lee with her loud laugh and questionable potato salad. Even my cousin Aaron was flying in from Denver. This was supposed to be a weekend of healing and reconnection. Or so I thought. Before I go any further, if you've ever had that one gut feeling you couldn't explain, and it turned out to be life-changing, this story is for you. Subscribe to hear how trusting that whisper saved everything I loved. At mile marker 113, Miles suddenly shifted. He leaned forward ever so slightly, watching the trees blur past the window. His knee bounced. He hadn't said a word in nearly an hour. "You okay?" I asked, glancing sideways. He didn't answer right away. Then, with a voice so low I almost missed it, he said, "Turn the car around." I blinked. "What?" He turned to me, his face pale, jaw tight, hands now clenched in his lap. "I mean it, Evie," he whispered. "Turn the car around. Now." "Miles, we're almost there. What's going on? Please, just turn around." He wasn't angry. He wasn't panicked. He was terrified. The kind of terror that doesn't shout. The kind that sits cold and silent in your chest. I didn't move the wheel. Is someone in danger? Did something happen? He shook his head slowly. "Not yet. But if we go there, something will." I pulled onto the next off-ramp and guided us to a gravel turnout behind an old gas station. The tires crunched beneath us. I threw the car into park and stared at him. "Miles, talk to me." He leaned back in the seat, rubbed his face, and let out a breath that sounded like it had been sitting inside him for months. I wasn't going to say anything. I wanted to go along with it. Smile. Pretend. But last night I had this feeling, this pressure in my chest. And this morning it got worse. "Pressure?" I asked, confused. He nodded. I couldn't breathe. And I saw them. Your parents. They were standing at the lake house porch, just watching. But their faces weren't right. I stared at him, unsure what to say. "It wasn't a dream," he whispered. It felt like a warning. Miles isn't the dramatic type. He's calm, methodical, and usually annoyingly rational. I'd never seen him shaken like this. And for some reason I felt it too. A gnawing, crawling unease that had followed us since we left home. So I did the only thing that made sense. I turned the car around. We drove back in silence. He didn't thank me. I didn't ask more questions. We just drove. When we got home, I texted my mom that Miles wasn't feeling well and we wouldn't be making it to the reunion. She replied 2 hours later with a simple, "That's disappointing. Hope he feels better. Nothing else. No, we'll miss you. No, we'll save you a plate. No, let's video call later." That wasn't like her. That night I couldn't sleep. Miles had passed out early, drained from whatever that morning had done to him. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, scrolling through family group chats. Something wasn't sitting right. Then I noticed it. A new thread from Daniel to my parents and Aunt Lee. "Everything's still on track for 9 a.m.? My mom's reply, "Yes. Evelyn isn't coming." That makes things easier. My blood ran cold. Easier? What did that mean? I clicked into the old photo albums my mom had uploaded to our shared drive. The same ones we'd been told to contribute to for the slideshow that was supposed to play at the reunion. Except mine were gone. Every picture I'd uploaded. Gone. I opened the phone's call log from earlier that day. I hadn't noticed at the time, but I had missed 2 back-to-back calls from an unknown number. No voicemail. No text. Something deep inside me twisted. I checked the shared GPS app we use for family travel safety. I hadn't looked at it in ages, but my brother's location pinged near a hotel, not the lake house. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that his phone went offline immediately afterward. Then I got the text. From my aunt. At 3:07 a.m. "I hope you understand one day." No punctuation. No emojis. No context. Just that. The next morning, I got a call from an old family friend, Ms. Grace, our former neighbor from the old neighborhood where I grew up. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Evelyn," she said in a hushed tone. "You didn't go, did you?" My mouth went dry. "No." "Why?" There was a pause. I'm not supposed to say anything. But I heard things. Your parents, they've been acting strange for weeks. Talking to people they shouldn't. Asking about insurance. About trust accounts. Something about a notarized letter and a medical directive. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. They think no one notices. But I do. I always have. Be careful, honey. Not every family reunion is about love. She hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time. My mind flashed back to Miles. To the whisper. To the fear. Turn the car around. He didn't just save me from a fight or a bad vibe. He saved me from something deeper. Something planned. And as I sat there, cold creeping through my veins, I realized something terrifying. Whatever happened at that lake house was meant to look like an accident. The day after the reunion that never was, I woke to the sound of our mailbox slamming shut. It was 6:12 a.m. No one delivers that early. And yet, when I stepped onto the porch, barefoot and bleary-eyed, there it was. A manila envelope. No address. No postage. Just my name, scrawled in tight, slanted handwriting across the front. Evelyn Hart, private. My stomach dropped. I carried it inside like it might explode in my hands. Miles was still asleep, and I didn't want to wake him until I understood what I was looking at. I opened the envelope. Inside were copies of financial documents, dozens of them. Property records, trust accounts, old tax filings. But it was the post-it note at the top that made me drop into the kitchen chair and stare. "They changed the beneficiary after your wedding. You were never supposed to find out." Miles walked in 15 minutes later and stopped mid-yawn when he saw me. "What's that?" "Proof," I whispered, "that they've been lying to me for years." I slid the papers toward him, and together we sifted through the mess. It turns out my grandfather had left a sizable inheritance, nearly $600,000, split between me and my brother, Daniel. Only Daniel received his. Mine, redirected. After Miles and I got married, my parents filed to become trustees over my half, citing emotional instability and erratic financial choices based on nothing. I'd never defaulted on a loan, never missed rent, never once gambled or carried credit card debt. But they convinced a lawyer, one of my father's old golf buddies, to grant the transfer. And since then, they've been quietly using my inheritance to fund home renovations, rental property investments, and even a luxury retirement cruise they never told me about. I couldn't breathe. Miles sat silently, flipping through notarized signatures and false affidavits. His jaw clenched tighter with every page. "Why would they do this?" I whispered. "Why go to such lengths?" He looked at me, pain in his eyes. "Because they didn't think you'd ever look. They didn't think you'd ever question them." And he was right. I'd spent most of my life excusing them. My mother's backhanded compliments. My father's subtle manipulation. The "we know what's best" tone they wore like armor. But now I saw them clearly. Not as caretakers, as thieves. Later that day, Miles pulled something else from the envelope I hadn't noticed earlier. A black and white photocopy of an old journal page. Dated 6 years ago. Signed by Aunt Lee. In shaky handwriting, she wrote, "If anything happens to Evelyn, I want it known that I disagreed with the plan." I told them she deserved to know. I told them to come clean before it was too late. Miles and I stared at each other. Aunt Lee knew. I whispered. But if she disagreed, why didn't she say anything when we saw her last? Maybe she tried. Maybe that text, "I hope you understand one day," was all she could say. That evening, I drove to Aunt Lee's place. I didn't tell anyone, not even Miles. I needed answers face to face. Her home sat on a quiet, sloped street outside town, with a swing bench that creaked whenever the wind caught it. I knocked 3 times. No answer. I tried the handle. Unlocked. "Lee!" I called. Nothing. I stepped inside. The living room was neat, untouched. A faint smell of lavender hung in the air. But on the coffee table sat a folder, bright red, with my name printed across the top in thick marker. It was open. Inside were medical documents, power of attorney forms. One labeled E. Hart, transfer directive, in the event of incapacity. And then I found the photo. A candid shot of me and Miles at a gas station, the same gas station where we'd pulled off when he told me to turn around. The timestamp, that morning. I staggered back. Someone had been following us. A door creaked down the hallway. I froze. Evelyn. I turned sharply. Aunt Lee stood in her bedroom doorway, robe tied tight, eyes puffy. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. We sat in her kitchen. She made tea with shaking hands. I didn't touch mine. "Tell me everything," I said. She stared at the table. "They started planning last year, after your grandfather died and the new trustee reviewed the old documents. Your mom panicked. She knew if you ever looked closely, you'd find out." "Find out what?" "That your grandfather wanted you to take control of the family trust. Not them. He saw how organized you were. How independent. Your mother, she hated that. I felt like my lungs had shrunk. They decided to make it look like you'd withdrawn early. Like you'd misuse funds. They even had fake documents printed. Miles ruined everything when he got suspicious." "How did he get suspicious?" Lee's eyes watered. "Because someone warned him." I stared. "You?" She nodded slowly. "I sent the photo. I figured if he saw that someone was watching you, he'd pull you both away." I drove home in silence that night, the red folder in my passenger seat like a cinder block on my chest. When I got inside, Miles was waiting at the door. "You okay?" he asked. I held up the folder. She confirmed everything. He pulled me into a hug. "Then we know what we're fighting now." "No," I whispered into his shirt. "Now we know who we're fighting. Some betrayals cut you once and bleed for a while. Others keep slicing, deeper or longer, every time you look at the people you once trusted." By now, the cuts were everywhere. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photocopied documents, those doctored affidavits, that shadowy photo of me and Miles at the gas station. But most of all, I saw my mother's cold reply. "That's disappointing. Hope he feels better." She knew what they were planning, and she still wanted us to show up. By morning, Miles and I had a plan. We weren't just going to sit and wait for the next envelope or warning text. We were going to confront the people behind the lies, starting with the man who had legally enabled it all. His name was Philip Ames, a private estate attorney my parents had known for decades. He'd drawn up their wills, helped transfer property when my grandfather passed, and, evidently, signed off on the quiet removal of me from my inheritance. What I didn't know yet was just how far his signature stretched. His office sat downtown, in a beige stone building with ivy creeping over the windows. Nothing flashy, just tidy and discreet, the kind of place that rich, manipulative families like to keep in their back pocket. Miles and I walked in together. We hadn't made an appointment, but when I dropped my parents' names at reception, the assistant blinked twice and said, "One moment, please." We were ushered into a plush office 5 minutes later. Philip Ames looked older than I remembered, grayer, thinner, with dark bags under his eyes that betrayed either stress or secrets. He didn't smile. "Evelyn," he said, gesturing stiffly to the seats across from his desk. "And Mr. Hart, to what do I owe the unexpected visit?" I placed the red folder on his desk, slow and deliberate. "Let's talk about trust," I said. "Specifically mine." His fingers twitched slightly before he even opened the folder. "This is sensitive information," he murmured, flipping through the pages. "Where did you—" "It was left for me," I interrupted. "By someone with a conscience. You should try it sometime." He gave a dry, humorless chuckle. "Evelyn, I assure you, your parents had full authority to—" "They lied, Philip," I snapped. "They manufactured mental health records that don't exist. They forged a claim that I couldn't manage my own finances, and you signed off on it." He looked up sharply. "That's a serious accusation. I've got more than accusations. I have digital copies of emails, financial transfers, copies of my original beneficiary statements from the trust." Philip leaned back, suddenly paler. "I was under the impression this was a mutual family decision." "Oh, please," Miles said coldly. "You don't notarize a forged medical directive without knowing it's forged. Don't play the clueless professional." I opened my bag and pulled out the final piece, the journal excerpt from Aunt Lee. Philip froze when he saw her name. I didn't think she still had this, he whispered. She did, I said. And if I have to take this to a judge to undo what you helped them do to me, I will. You have one chance to come clean. Now. He stared at the folder, then at me. Then slowly he sighed. They told me you had married someone unstable, that your behavior had changed, that you were impulsive with money and refused to include them in estate matters. I didn't ask questions. I just processed the paperwork. No, I said coldly. You enabled the theft of my inheritance. You helped steal $500,000 from me and reroute it into an account that benefits only them. Philip's hands trembled slightly as he pulled open a desk drawer. I can amend the filing, he said. Submit a reversal to the trustee with updated documentation. It won't be instant, but it'll start the process. And what about the account itself? Miles asked. The rental properties they bought? The cruise. Philip hesitated. That'll require civil litigation. Unless they settle voluntarily. I looked him dead in the eyes. They won't. And you know it. Back home, Miles and I compiled everything into a digital file. Every document, every statement, every signature. We encrypted it and sent a copy to 2 lawyers, just in case. That's when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in months. Daniel. My brother. I stared at the screen. Are you going to answer it? Miles asked. I nodded slowly, then tapped to accept. Hello. There was a long pause. Then, Evie. I messed up. His voice was quiet, raw. I didn't know what they were doing. Not really. They said you opted out, that you were going to start a foundation instead. I just believed them. You believed Mom and Dad over me, I said. I know. And now they're furious. Lee called me. Said you found out everything. Why are you calling, Daniel? He exhaled. To tell you the worst part. Silence. Then he said, they tried to take out a life insurance policy in your name, with them as the beneficiaries, right before the reunion. My heart stopped. They what? I overheard it. Mom said something about needing to get the paperwork handled before you arrived. I didn't understand it at the time, but now I do. That's why they wanted you at the lake house. Did you sign anything? No, he said quickly. But I think Dad used some of my ID to make it look like I approved it. I'm so sorry, Evelyn. I could barely speak. Evie, he said gently. They're not who we thought. I think they never were. After the call, I stood in the hallway shaking. Miles, I whispered. He turned to me. One look at my face and he froze. They took out a policy, I said. On me. He didn't move, didn't speak, just wrapped his arms around me like I might disappear if he didn't hold on tight. And somewhere deep in my chest, the truth settled like a stone. Turning around saved my life. If you've never had to sue your own parents, count yourself lucky. It's a grief that has no name when love turns into a legal case file. When the people who raised you suddenly become the people you must protect yourself from. After Daniel's call, I didn't hesitate. I called Marcus Vale, a litigation attorney Miles knew from his previous firm. Quiet, calm, razor-sharp. The kind of lawyer who didn't posture, but executed. I'll take the case, he said after reviewing the documents. But Evelyn, this will get ugly. The moment we file, they'll retaliate. People like your parents don't back down. They erase. I didn't flinch. Then I'll make sure there's nothing left for them to erase. 2 days later, we officially filed for fraudulent misappropriation of inherited assets, forgery of legal and medical documents, attempted unlawful insurance filing with falsified consent. Miles and I sat across from Marcus in his downtown office as he slid the file across the polished oak desk. Once they're served, it's war, he warned. And trust me, these kinds of wars aren't fought in courtrooms. They're fought over family group chats, email leaks, and phone calls in the dark. I nodded. Let them come. They came. Within 24 hours of service, my parents' lawyer, someone named Randall Sherwood, sent a cease and desist accusing me of public defamation, citing my reckless accusations and slanderous implications toward respected community figures. Respected. My parents had built their image like armor, church committee, charity boards, smiling Christmas letters. People loved them. But I knew better now. Behind the smiles were ledgers. Behind the charity events were offshore wire transfers. Behind the prayers were plans. But what none of us expected was the audio. It arrived anonymously. An email. No name. No subject. Just an attachment titled, Before the Reunion.mp3. I stared at it. Miles looked over my shoulder. Open it. I clicked. Voices. Muffled at first. Then clearer. Mom, everything's arranged. The policy goes into effect on Saturday. She just needs to show up. That's all. Dad, you're sure no one will check the paperwork? Mom, Randall said it's airtight. Evelyn won't ask questions. She never does. Dad, and if the boat capsizes? Mom, coldly. Then we grieve. We move forward. And we finally have room to breathe again. The recording ended. I sat frozen. Every hair on my arm stood up. They weren't just manipulative. They weren't just liars. They were planning to kill me. We took the file to Marcus the same day. Where did this come from? He asked. No idea, I said. Anonymous email. He examined it, had a tech specialist verify its metadata. It's authentic. Recorded 2 days before the reunion. Then who recorded it? Miles answered quietly. A staff member. He was right. Because 20 minutes later, another email came in from a burner address. I used to work for your family. I was cleaning upstairs when I heard them. I recorded it. I couldn't keep silent. I'm sorry I didn't send it sooner. Be careful. They're watching everyone. The shock morphed into something else. Fire. This was no longer just about my money or my trust. This was about survival. We filed the audio with the court under emergency evidence. The response was immediate. A judge issued a temporary restraining order against both my parents. Marcus submitted a petition for protective custody review of any remaining family assets under their control. And within 48 hours, their respected image began to crack. A former family accountant leaked receipts showing asset transfers between the family trust and 3 shell companies linked to Daniel's name, companies he had never authorized. An old church friend posted a cryptic message on Facebook. Sometimes wolves wear suits. Pray for those discovering the teeth. It got 500 shares. Whispers turned to questions. Questions turned to concern. Concern turned to scrutiny. And then silence. For a week, I didn't hear from my parents. No calls. No letters. Just absence. Until one morning, Miles found a package on our porch. No postage. No name. Just a single rose inside and a folded note. This didn't have to happen. I took it inside, put on gloves, and sealed the rose in a plastic bag. Marcus had it tested. No prints. No poison. Just symbolism. A final threat wrapped in sentiment. They hadn't given up. They were regrouping. But something else happened that week. I received a call from Daniel again. This time, his voice was steadier. I've spoken to Randall, he said. I told him to pull my name from the shell companies. If they forged anything, they'll have to face it alone. Why now? I asked. Because I saw the bank transfers. The ones to Dad's account labeled Departure Prep. They told me it was a relocation fund. What is it really? A payout, he said bitterly. If something happened to you. Silence passed like fog. I want to testify, he said. When I told Marcus, he leaned back and nodded. He's not perfect, but his testimony could make your case bulletproof. Miles added quietly, and it'll ruin their narrative. The next hearing was set for 10 days later. Until then, we kept our heads down, our doors locked, and our digital trail clean. But inside I was no longer afraid. I was ready. They tried to silence me. They tried to erase me. They tried to end me. But they forgot one thing. I turned the car around. And now, I was driving the narrative. I used to believe courtrooms were about truth. That if you just spoke clearly and brought the facts, justice would arrive like a slow but sure sunrise. But when I stepped into that polished, echoing room, I realized something else. Court isn't about truth. It's about proof. And I had both. The courtroom wasn't packed. No press, no cameras, but every seat felt like a stage. My parents sat across the aisle with their lawyer, Randall Sherwood. My mother wore pearls. My father, a navy blazer. They looked like pillars of a community. They even smiled when I walked in. That smile chilled me. Miles sat beside me. His hand never left mine. Marcus leaned toward me and whispered, "Stay calm. Let the facts speak louder than their charm." The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Honorable Justice Wren, called the session to order. We were here for preliminary injunction, to freeze family assets, challenge beneficiary fraud, and present emergency evidence regarding an alleged life insurance plot. Marcus opened with quiet precision. "Your Honor, will show this is not a simple financial dispute. This is a case of calculated erasure, legal manipulation meant to remove Ms. Hart from her rightful inheritance and potentially her life." Gasps rippled from the few in the gallery. My parents didn't blink. Then came the audio. Marcus played the file. The voices. My mother's cold calm. My father's nervous silence. The line that still echoed in my sleep. Then we grieve. We move forward. And we finally have room to breathe again. Justice Wren's expression changed, subtle but sharp. Randall stood, protesting. "The audio is unverified, and even if it were authentic, it is circumstantial. We can't infer intent from a private conversation taken without consent." Marcus countered swiftly. "The recording came from a staff member, taken in a common area of a shared property where no expectation of privacy was legally protected. And the metadata confirms it was recorded 2 days before the reunion Ms. Hart was invited to." The judge allowed it. And just like that, my parents' mask cracked. Then came Daniel. He entered the courtroom like a man walking through fire. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. After taking the oath, he locked eyes with me before speaking. "My sister didn't deserve any of this," he said plainly. "I was told she had agreed to relinquish her inheritance, that she was moving toward nonprofit work and didn't want to deal with the trust." He paused. The silence was heavy. "That was a lie." Randall objected, hearsay. Overruled. Daniel continued. "They took out a life insurance policy under her name. Told me it was for emergency protection during the reunion trip. I didn't ask enough questions. I should have. But once I saw the transfers, how they used my name on shell companies, I knew they were planning something bigger." He turned to the judge. "I'm not proud of what I ignored, but I want to make it right. I'm here to testify for her." I wiped a single tear from my cheek, not out of sadness, but clarity. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, walked to the witness stand, took the oath, and I told the truth. From the moment we left for the reunion, to the whisper that saved me, to the envelope that arrived without warning, to the sound of my mother's voice, plotting the most polished betrayal I'd ever known. I spoke calmly. No dramatics, no theatrics, just facts. And finally I looked at them. My mother, who once tucked me in at night with stories. My father, who taught me how to ride a bike and balance a checkbook. And I said, "You raised me to be smart, but not to question you. You taught me how to smile through pain, how to hide anger behind manners. But you never expected me to uncover everything you buried." I didn't turn the car around out of paranoia. I turned it around because I felt you stop loving me. And now I know why. The courtroom was quiet when I stepped down. Even the judge looked momentarily shaken. Randall requested a recess. It was granted. Outside the courtroom, my mother approached me. No words, just a look. "You think you've won," she whispered. I didn't flinch. "I think I've survived." She leaned in closer. "You've always been dramatic." I stepped back. "And you've always been calculated. This time, you miscalculated." She gave a smile so fake it trembled. "You'll regret this." I nodded toward Miles, standing protectively beside me. "I already did, but I don't anymore." When the court reconvened, Justice Wren announced a preliminary ruling. All family assets linked to my parents and their shell accounts were frozen pending investigation. The trustee was ordered to re-examine the inheritance structure and reverse unlawful beneficiary changes. A formal review for criminal fraud charges was submitted to the district attorney's office. And the life insurance policy was voided entirely, its underwriter subpoenaed for further inquiry. It wasn't over, but it was a victory. And it was mine. Outside the courthouse, reporters had started to gather. Someone must have leaked the audio file, or Daniel's testimony, or maybe the story just demanded attention. When one of them shouted, "Evelyn, any comment?" I turned and said, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because silence nearly cost me my life. If you feel something is wrong, even if it's family, especially if it's family, turn the car around. Then I walked away. Trauma doesn't announce its exit. It lingers. It echoes. It curls into your bones and reshapes your view of things. Even after the courtroom lights dimmed and the reporters moved on, I felt it, like a shadow that never fully detaches. I won the ruling. I reclaimed what was mine. But peace, that was something else entirely. 3 weeks after the hearing, I was back home. Miles had returned to work. The world around me was quiet, unsettlingly so. No packages, no threats, just silence. My parents had disappeared into legal limbo. They were still under investigation, still hiding behind lawyers, still weaving whatever narrative they could muster. But the truth was already out there. Their circle had shrunk. The polite invitation stopped. Whispers replaced applause. Daniel had moved out of the city. He was still shaken, still unpacking his own complicity, but we spoke often. Our conversations weren't warm, but they were honest. That was more than we'd ever had growing up. One cloudy afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address. No handwriting. Just typed, single-spaced, and clipped at the corner. Evelyn, you were never supposed to know. Your grandfather's original letter, he wrote you one, was taken before you could read it. Your father burned it. I watched him. He wanted the money to fix his mistakes. Your mother wanted to cut you out, so she'd stay in control. You were never the problem. You were the threat to their story. Don't let them rewrite it. A friend. I read it 3 times. The letter had no signature, but I recognized the rhythm of the phrasing. Aunt Lee. Even from the margins, she was still trying to help. That night, I searched through my own memory vault. Old journals. Childhood drawings. One yellowed paper fell out of an envelope marked Yates, age 11. It was a family tree I'd drawn in school. Every branch was labeled except mine. Instead of my name, I'd written. I remember asking my teacher if I could change it because my mom said I hadn't earned my place yet. At the time, I thought it was a joke. Now, I realized it was the first warning I'd ignored. In therapy, I told my counselor, I don't think I ever really had parents. I had architects. They built an image, and I was just the accessory to it. She nodded softly. Now that the image has collapsed, who are you without it? That question hit harder than anything the courtroom ever threw at me. Because I didn't know. But I started to. Slowly. By opening Keenheart, a quiet, private consulting firm for people navigating family betrayal and financial trauma. No big launch. No social media fanfare. Just word of mouth. One survivor at a time. I called it Tunback Advisors. Because sometimes the best move is the one that saves your life, not your image. I also started mentoring a high school student named Mia. She had bright eyes and too much doubt in her own brilliance. One day, she asked me why I left my old family behind. I smiled and said, because sometimes the ones who raised you can't handle the person you're becoming. She nodded slowly, and for the first time in months, I felt that I wasn't just surviving, I was planting. Then came the invitation. Not to another court date, not from Daniel or the attorneys, but from the trustee. After re-examining my grandfather's final wishes, they found something. A sealed safe deposit box, untouched for nearly 10 years. Inside was a signed letter in my grandfather's handwriting, a photo of him and me fishing by the dock when I was 12, and a tiny key rusted but intact. The letter read, My Evie, if you're reading this, it means they failed to erase you. I always saw your strength, even when they tried to bury it. You were meant to lead, not to be led. Whatever happens, remember this. Blood is just ink. What matters is the pen in your hand. Finish the story your way. Granddad, I cried in the bank lobby, not because of what I'd lost, but because I now understood what I'd preserved. My truth, my story, my voice. Miles met me outside. He took one look at my face and held out his arms. No words, just arms. And when he asked, Are you okay? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Finally, yes. I used to wish I'd never turned around that morning, that we'd just gone to the reunion, pretended, played along. But that whisper, that, turn the car around now, wasn't a detour. It was a resurrection. Because when I turned the wheel, I also turned the story. I swerved out of their narrative and into my own. So here I am, still healing, still learning, still rewriting. And if you ever hear that voice inside you, quiet, shaking, unsure, but begging you to pull away from something that doesn't feel right, turn the car around. You'll thank yourself for the rest of your life.